Welcome back to a Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. Dominion Voting Systems, the election equipment provider at the center of accusations in 2020 by Donald Trump and his Republican allies of voter fraud, has been sold to a company headed by an ex-GOP election official, Scott Linedecker, and rebranded as Liberty Vote. Mr. Linedecker had previously served as the Republican director for the St. Louis City Board of Election. I think it's pretty safe to say that a Republican directly controlling the company that provided 27 states in the 2024 election with their voting machines, the only liberty most are going to have is to vote for a Republican in this upcoming election. Let's also remember that those accusations in 2020 of voter fraud for Dominion were proven to be false. They were not true. Linedecker says he wants to use the new company to, quote, restore public confidence in the U.S. electoral process. To do this, they plan on putting a heavy emphasis on using paper ballots. Quote, Liberty Vote is committed to delivering election technology that prioritizes paper-based transparency, security, and simplicity, so that voters can be assured that every ballot is filled in accurately and fairly counted. This push for paper ballots and moving away from electronic voting really never did it for me. I know those on the right really believe that paper ballots are the be-all, end-all, and that electronic voting is just going to make their Republican vote turn into a Democratic vote because the Democrats are evil and fixing the elections. But in a lot of ways, I felt that paper ballots are maybe even less safe than their electronic counterparts. Even if we discount the whole notion of changed votes if they're electronic, which has been proven to be completely false and not a real concern. This notion of moving to all paper ballots just opens up the window for them to misplace a lot of Democratic votes. This idea that paper ballots are in some way a way of maintaining election integrity just doesn't hold water to me. For one thing, the majority of electronic voting machines do have an auditable paper trail. So even if I was someone that believed that paper was the way, it's also there. Your vote is not just a bunch of ones and zeros. It's in a machine, and you just have to trust the integrity of the machine. Although I do, but so-called electronic voting has a physical paper trail that can be double-checked in the case that it needs to be. When they say they want all paper votes, I think back to the images of the mail-in voting drop-off boxes that were set on fire during this past election. The fact they happened in the upper Northwest in areas that were predominantly known to be Democratic strongholds was no coincidence. Putting emphasis on only paper votes gives the opportunity to have votes destroyed and not counted, especially in an election where the opposition party doesn't want Democrats to regain power. Those on the right opposed to electronic voting would always say, well, how do I know my vote's going to be counted right? But if we have all paper ballots, how do I know my vote is going to survive long enough to be counted at all? I find it almost ironic this Republican guy buys Dominion and says, oh, I'm going to make voting less shady. If anything, I feel like he's making voting more shady, not less. I had far more faith in election integrity with electronic votes than I would with an all-paper voting system. Oh, and also let's not forget that Dominion sued after all those false claims of their machines having been used to flip Trump votes in 2020 for Joe Biden. And Fox News had to pay them over $787 million back in 2023 to end the case. And Newsmax was on the hook for $67 million. Not to mention there's still a pending defamation lawsuit against Mike Lindell, which he refuses to pay. The whole idea that electronic voting is somehow unsafe has been proven untrue over and over and over. And while I absolutely believe one of the political parties would use the voting system to cheat to win, it's not the Democrats. And there's way too many Republican fingers in this Liberty Vote pie for my comfort. And while I definitely don't want to come off as alarmist, I definitely think people should see this news and be concerned. If Republicans see a way to be dishonest, they will take it. And this looks to me as a way to be dishonest, and they will take it if given the opportunity. I know it makes me sound like the election deniers of 2020, but I don't think we can trust these voting machines now. And I'm not sure that we can't consider every subsequent election as probably tampered with. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure that we can consider the 2024 election not having been tampered with. There were some weird irregularities, like people voting down ballot Democrat except for president. But of course, the party and people that saw voter fraud in every election they didn't win and were obsessed with election integrity, once they won, weren't really that interested in looking into that kind of thing. It's scary because it feels not like the takeover is coming. It feels like the takeover has already happened. There was this fear that maybe they wouldn't let another election happen to retain their power, but now they don't have to worry about that. They can let elections happen and just make sure that Republicans never lose. All this outcry from the right about fixed elections and questionable election outcomes seem more like a confession of intent. And I have to admit, it left me feeling a bit anxious for our future. A comforting thought was, as bad as things are right now, as bad as they feel, at least we have the chance to take back a little bit of the power in this midterm election and then keep going, and then in 2028 finally get these Republicans out. But now I'm not so confident that's possible. I'm not confident they're going to allow that to happen. If there's the very real possibility that we can't trust the voting machines to truly portray the will of the people when they vote, where exactly does that leave us? But I guess I say us, but if you're a Republican, I guess you've got nothing to worry about because your guy is probably going to win every election now. I think a lot of people are wondering now, what can they do now? Are they just stuck knowing that the system of free and fair elections that we've counted on forever is just gone now? That you can vote, but you can't be sure that your vote will actually be counted for the person that you voted for, assuming it's counted at all? I don't really know, and I don't want to give in to conjecture or just full on despair, but this news definitely feels like a red flag. It's certainly a sign of bad things to come. It's like they saw those Dominion voting machines and said, well, we can't be sure they're not rigged, so we better rig them first just to be safe. But despite all this, I think it's very important to not give in to that despair, not give in to the hopelessness and think, oh, well, all is lost now. Pack it in, boys. America's over. I totally get where that's coming from. I can definitely see how it feels like that, certainly. But it's giving into that hopelessness and the complacency that comes with it. That is exactly what these people count on. You don't have to rig an election or change people's vote in a computer if you can make them so afraid to vote that they never vote at all. Yes, it definitely feels like we're in the midst of an authoritarian takeover and that voting feels almost pointless because they've already won. But one of the ways despots keep their power is by convincing their opposition that fighting back can never work, that it's pointless to resist, that resistance is futile. But the reality is, even despite this news, resistance is never futile. They cannot win in the long run. Our nation was founded on the opposition of a king, opposing the ruling of our country by a singular man who thought his rule was absolute. America is not a nation of emperors or kings or rulers of that sort, and we never will be. And fighting the power is hard, especially when they seem to have all the cards, and anything that you can come up with, they just counter because they've got it all. But hard as it seems, I'm confident that things are going to get better, and soon. The American people as a whole are not going to just sit back and let their nation slide into authoritarian control. As I've already said many times before, that is not America. That is not who we are, and it will never be who we are. We are not a people content to live under tyranny. And if we have a leader or a political party that is content to allow us to be, we must unite and say no. If there's one thing that's quintessentially American, seeing injustice or a leader abusing their power and not letting it go. And unfortunately, this time it's not some foreign despot or regime. It's the one grown right here in the United States of America. One that branded the anti-fascist a terrorist organization. I think it's pretty safe to say if you're the guy against the anti-fascist, you're probably the bad guy. And doing what you can to take away people's votes unless they vote for you is yet another way of proving that the current administration are the bad guys and the ones that must be fought against. One of the things we've always been able to point to is to say in our elections, every vote counts. And that must always remain the case. And some Republican rich guy buying the voting machine company shouldn't be something that changes that. If they were truly about voter integrity and safety and making sure that the elections were fair and right, I would be all for that. But I don't get a sense that they actually are. The Republican Party are a party of voter disenfranchisement and actual fraud. Getting as many of them out of office as soon as possible is of paramount importance. elections. And unfortunately, the only way to do that at this moment is to vote in every election possible and not give in to that feeling where it's already pointless. If the rebels in Star Wars had given up when it seemed pointless, they wouldn't have blown up the Death Star or gotten to throw the Emperor down a big shaft. And while it's maybe too much to hope to throw Donald Trump down a big shaft and explode, we can always dream. So that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. Until next time, I've been your host, Mr. Slice. And until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news.